Have you ever looked at the price of gas, or maybe a new phone, and just wondered, how did they come up with that number? Well, a lot of it has to do with this massive, invisible system that runs the world's economy. And to really see how it works, and more importantly, how it can break, we're going to follow one country's fight for its very financial survival.
Right. Our story starts in Pakistan, a nation that's been trapped in this repeating loop of economic crisis. And their story, it really pulls back the curtain on just how fragile this whole global system can be, and, who really holds the cards when things go bad.
For years, Pakistan has been stuck in what you might call a perfect storm. We're talking massive public debt, and they're constantly buying more stuff from the world than they're selling. That's a classic trade deficit. And as a result, their currency, the rupee, has been in a total nosedive. This has forced them over and over again to call in the world's financial paramedics, the International Monetary Fund, or as you've probably heard it, the IMF.
Now, to really get a feel for how big this crisis is, just look at the numbers. If you go back to 2008, $1 would get you about 63 Pakistani rupees, okay? Pretty stable. Now let's fast forward to early 2023. That same single US dollar, it could now buy you 278 rupees. Yeah, that's a collapse of more than 4 times in value. I mean, that is the textbook definition of a currency in very, very deep trouble. At the exact same time, the country's rainy day fund, its reserves of US dollars that it needs to pay for things like oil and medicine from other countries, had shrunk to less than $3 billion. That is barely enough to cover 1 month of imports. The country was literally on the brink of going broke.
So, with nowhere else to turn, they went back to the IMF. And get this was their 13th bailout since the 1980s. Nope, that's not a typo, 13 times. It really makes you wonder, right? Is the whole system broken, or is there something about the rules of this game that just keeps countries like Pakistan trapped in this cycle?
To even begin to answer that, we've got to zoom out a bit and actually understand the rules of the game. How is the value of a country's money, whether it's the rupee or the dollar or anything else, how is it actually decided on the world stage? It all comes down to this thing called the International Monetary System. Now, I know, the name sounds super formal and intimidating, but don't worry. Just think of it as the global rulebook for money. It's the set of agreements that decides how we figure out what one country's currency is worth compared to another's. Basically, countries have 2 main options. They can let their currency float, which is what the US does. Its value just goes up and down based on global supply and demand. Or they can peg it. That means they literally anchor their currency's value to a more stable one, usually the US dollar or the euro.
But there's also a kind of middle ground, which some people call a managed float, or even a dirty float. And this is exactly what Pakistan was doing. See, on paper, the market was setting the price of the rupee, but behind the scenes, their central bank was constantly stepping in, using those precious dollar reserves to buy up its own currency to stop it from falling so fast. It's an expensive game to play, and spoiler alert, it's almost always a losing one. This whole system of floating and pegged currencies is actually pretty new. To really get it, we need to jump in a time machine and go way back, to a time when money's value wasn't just some number on a screen. It was tied to something real, something you could actually hold in your hand, solid gold. This was the famous gold standard. For decades, from the late 1800s until World War I, money had this real, tangible backing. A US dollar was worth a specific weight in gold, and so was a British pound. It created a ton of stability. But that stability just couldn't survive the chaos of a world war and then a massive global depression. The beauty of the gold standard was this elegant, self-correcting system. It was almost magical. If a country sold more stuff than it bought, gold would literally flow into that country. This would increase their money supply, which then caused prices to rise, making their goods more expensive for other countries to buy. And just like that, bam, trade would automatically balance itself out. You didn't need politicians or bankers to fiddle with it. But in the turmoil between the 2 world wars, that elegance just vanished. Countries started playing this really desperate game, intentionally devaluing their own currencies to make their exports cheaper and basically steal jobs from their neighbors. It turned into a race to the bottom that just made the Great Depression even worse for everyone. So by the time World War II was ending, the global economy was an absolute wreck. The old system wasn't just broken, a lot of people thought it was one of the causes of all the chaos. World leaders knew they had pretty much one shot to build something completely new, a system that was actually designed to create peace and prosperity.
So in 1944, delegates from 44 different countries all met in this tiny town in New Hampshire called Bretton Woods. And their mission was crystal clear: create a stable economic order that would let the world rebuild and grow after the war.
And what they came up with were these two incredibly powerful new pillars for the global economy. First, you have the World Bank to help fund rebuilding and development. And second, you have the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, which was designed to be the official referee for the whole monetary system. And it's the IMF that brings our whole story full circle, right back to Pakistan.
See, the whole idea behind the IMF was this powerful trade-off. It was supposed to provide discipline, acting like a strict trainer, making sure countries followed the rules. But it was also supposed to offer flexibility, acting like a medic, always ready with a financial safety net for any country that got into trouble. And that brings us right back to the present day, into Pakistan, where that founding mission of discipline and flexibility is being put to the ultimate test, with the fate of millions of people hanging in the balance. So here's the discipline part of the deal. The IMF didn't just write a check. In exchange for the bailout, it demanded that Pakistan make some really painful changes. Raise taxes, slash popular subsidies on things like fuel and electricity, raise interest rates, and, this was the big one, stop using its reserves to artificially prop up its currency. And then here's the flexibility. In return for swallowing that tough medicine, the IMF provided a lifeline, a $6.5 billion loan. Just enough to keep Pakistan from defaulting on its debts and to prevent a complete and total economic meltdown. Okay, so we've been through a lot of history, a lot of economics. What's the big takeaway here? Why should a crisis happening halfway around the world and the rules of this big global institution, why should any of that matter to you? Well, it matters because this is the invisible architecture of our modern world. The stability of all these exchange rates and the rules set by organizations like the IMF, they influence absolutely everything, from the price of the phone you're holding, to the interest rates on a mortgage, to the huge political decisions that our leaders have to make every single day. And that leaves us with this really fundamental tension at the very heart of our global economy. Is the IMF a necessary firefighter, saving countries from their own mistakes and protecting the rest of us from the fallout? Or is it this unelected global power that forces countries to make painful choices that their own citizens would never, ever vote for? The truth is probably somewhere in the middle. But wrestling with that question really defines the entire balance of power in our crazy, interconnected world.